Oh, it won't let me share. There we go. Here, so I'm Karen Lindwall-Bourg. I'm a former owner and president of the National Association of Christian Women Entrepreneurs, and I'm sitting with Heather, who is the current owner and president of the National Association of Christian Women Entrepreneurs. That's how we met. We met under the direction of Diane, the founder and first president of NACWE. And we've written a book together, and that's why we're here. So if you've watched any of our other interviews or my personal talk on the book, you kind of already know that we chose as a theme for the year 2022 to talk about how we cultivate confidence from the Lord to be who he has called us to be and to do what he has called us to do, and how that confidence has, even just in the last year, and you've kind of continued that theme even into this year, it has changed my world, is astronomical. It's almost, I almost cannot describe it. And so I'm hoping to see more. We think this is book one of probably 7, is what we think, books ultimately. And I'll be honest with you, in the middle of the process of the book, I thought, I'm not doing this again. And then, of course, as soon as it popped up on Amazon and got the reviews that it's been getting, I thought, yeah, we can do this. We can do this again. So luckily, we didn't have to do it alone, which is, I think, the reason we met. We sought out communities online that, would mean that we could do what we wanted to do, what we were called to do, and do it with excellence, but not have to do it alone. And I can't even think of, goodness, the number of times I've called on you for, even just for a pat on the back or prayer or for help with various things, and maybe you with me as well. So you've been a blessing. The book so far has been a blessing, and that's our goal. We want this book to be a blessing for others. So we're going to just stop sharing the screen and just let us have a chat time.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll start by saying how I think we met. I think we must have met in one of the NACWE webinars, or at a NACWE conference, or one of Diane's masterminds or something.
I know. I'm trying to remember that too, because it feels like I've just known you, right? Like you're just a part of my life and have been for at least a few years.
Yeah, I don't even know.
I think it was a NACWE conference when we first met in person a few years ago, but I know we were connected online before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it had to have been through Diane. I just can't remember the exact circumstances surrounding it.
And isn't it that way with most of our relationships? Not the ones we live with, but the others. I've had to ask people, how do we know one another? How did we meet? But we did. And before we even talk about the book, let's talk about, when I thought that it was time for me to move on and to hand the mantle of NACWE into someone else's hands, you were one of the first people that I thought of. But I also saw you. I was part of some of your programs. I benefited from your coaching, and I knew what you were doing and thought, well, she's not going to want to do this because there's just so many other things in the works. And I never really reached out to anyone saying, what, I've been praying about this and I think it's you. It was in a very restful place. You already know this. And I just kind of sat back and said to the Lord, I think I'm ready. Can you move things along in the right direction? And of course he did. So yeah. So I'm thrilled that it has been you. Really, you're approaching a year, in just 2 months, really. We actually told everybody everything and made it official at the 1st of June, but really the middle of May.
Yeah. And we knew it was about this time last year, right? That we started having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it has, yeah.
And you're doing a great, amazing job. I love all the new things. And I love so for you guys, we'll put links in the video and everything, but you need to go to NACWE. Do you want them to go to NACWE.com or NACWE.org?
So NACWE.org is where the whole website is, right? Like it really has all of the information. NACWE.com is simply, if you're ready to join, that's where you go, is NACWE.com. And so it has the join button, but you can get to it from NACWE.org. So
Yeah.
really the place to begin is NACWE.org, so that
and then
all the things.
Find the National Association of Christian Women Entrepreneurs on Facebook too, because really everything you ever needed to know about, what we're doing and what happens next is right there. To me, that home, NACWE was established in 2010. And I think I came along, we're still not sure. You look back in the records, but in 2012.
Okay.
Having just established a group online like that, thinking, oh no, I need to know more, and so do you, and so do you, and so do you, about running your business and doing it God's way. And then we found NACWE, and I found one another, and Diane and I found one another. And it's been such a comfortable home for so long. And I think it's a privilege to still kind of be a part of it in some ways, because it still feels like home. I find that very fascinating, that you're not intimidated by the fact that my face is still in the webinars and things like that. And it's been a real blessing to me. I didn't know, if I should just step away, and then come back, but it's fascinating. I think that is the testimony to the grace of God and to our faith in God and to our confidence. We'll use the word confidence.
Yeah.
So I hope there are more books. I hope this is one of about 7. I have benefited so much every time I've picked it up. And so I'm just going to let you talk to us about how you came to be. You can talk about NACWE if you want, how you came to be part of the book, how your chapter, writing it, the process of writing it, has inspired confidence in you, and how other parts of the book or process even, may have increased confidence in God for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So I know, when before I took over NACWE, like I had spoken for you, right? Like for NACWE, when you were, and so was already, I think, a part of, like, hey, do you want to be a part of this book? Because we had already spoke some things on confidence at February of last year, or no, it was March of last year. We did the confidence in calendaring and creating, did that whole thing. So we had done some of those things. And then when God said, it's you're taking it over. It's like, oh, really? Yeah, okay.
I love that we laugh about those transitions, because they could have been really difficult.
Yeah. And, everything has gone so smoothly with that transition. It really is the grace of God, and just knowing his timing is right. Even if we are like, we don't necessarily see the big picture when he tells us the first step, right? Like ever.
Ever.
Yeah, I don't think I do ever anyway. But then all of a sudden, the chapter had a different meaning. And so it was a privilege to write the chapter. And honestly, like the stretching, like we talked about this when I was writing my chapter. I'm like, I'm sorry, it took me a long time to get it to you. I was like, I don't feel like I'm a writer, right? I can speak much easier than I can just write. And when I do write, I try to write how I just say it in my head and write it. But it's a whole different sort of process. And so definitely grew me. It grew me so much as thinking of myself as a writer. I have one more book coming out this year that's all mine, that I'm the main author on. And then I have another anthology book related to marketing coming out that a friend of mine is putting together. And so I have that one too. And so, it just isn't something that I ever, I would never have said I'm a writer.
But what confidence inspiring, inspiration that is, especially to people who are writing their very first book, that if you just hang in there through that book, you'll be more confident to take on the next one and the next one and the next one,
For sure.
or whatever God has called you to
Yeah.
do. My first book was requested by a publishing company that had heard me speak. Again, I also didn't consider myself a writer. And it was difficult. It took 2.5 years. It was the most painstaking thing I think I've ever done. I almost still have PTSD from 2000. I think that was 2011. But after doing that, I thought, I can leap tall buildings with a single bound. I can conquer the world. I can do this. It doesn't mean that there's not some trepidation as we sit down to write, because we want to write as God has inspired us to. We don't want to be wasting our time. We want his words to come through, not ours per se. And it's a journey, right?
It's definitely.
And luckily we didn't all have to do it alone, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we both sort of ascribe to that, like everything's better together kind of which is why I was thinking about the first NACWE conference, and how after it, like you and I sat there for probably 2 hours and just talked.
Right.
And so that's this testament to not doing things alone, right? Like doing them together, and the confidence that comes by doing, right? For all of this. Yeah. That's my main takeaway for all of it, right? Is doing it anyway, having the courage to do it, and then the confidence comes after. So like you mentioned, when the book is done, like, I don't know if I ever want to do this again, then it's done and you're like, oh yeah, we'll do this again. Right? Like, I'm fully confident I can do this again. No problem.
Well, and the confidence to do it if it's what God called you to do, which is what your chapter is on. How do you have the confidence? It takes such surrender in multiple dimensions of your life to do what he has called you to do. And we were just in a webinar where we talked about being sure of who we are and what we're called to do. We talk about that probably as often as we talk about gleaning confidence. And I'm glad. I think it's fascinating that you wrote on that. We didn't ask everyone, here's what we want you to write on. We said to everyone, what do you want to write on? That was fascinating. And there's a beautiful overlap in almost every chapter of scriptures used, of quotes used, of calling. Because I had talked, without really realizing it, I had also talked about your calling in a previous chapter, and then you talked about the confidence to surrender and to do what it takes, which isn't always easy,
right,
within your calling. And you've been a great testimony of that, in my entrepreneur life, of being transparent and honest about the struggle along the path of getting to where he's called you to be. But look at how many people's have touched our lives. We've touched each other's lives, or how many lives God will touch with our work, and hopefully with the book. I mean, I'm really looking forward. Just the testimonies that have come through so far have just been so sweet to hear and so inspiring to hear. We need those to know that we're on the right path and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Anything else about the book, or just tell us what you do, which is like, we could write a dissertation, and where you want people to find you. And
yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point, because in the book, a lot of things I come back to, right, is just surrender, trust, and then obey. And so, because it takes those 3 things, right? Like I can surrender, and then it's the stepping out in action, right, that can stop us sometimes. In fact, I know I've told you this, when God said you're taking over NACWE, it was like, really? And then you're like, okay, so there's like this surrender moment. Then it was like, I don't know what this looks like.
right.
And it's like, all right, I trust you, God. And then it was like, I have to text Karen or I'm not going to.
Before I disobey, I better obey really quickly.
Right, obey quickly. Let myself get in the way. So yeah. So for me, that's sort of where that confidence in God's call comes from, is just being connected to him and knowing he said it. Yeah, there's many times like I question, like, did God say that or am I just thinking it? This was not one of those times. It was pretty clear.
It was all such a blessing. I appreciate it. It was very, and the transition from Diane's presidency to mine was also a blessing. We didn't always agree on everything, but we came to agreement on everything. And it did take quite a bit longer and was a lot more detailed process, probably, than the process of transitioning for you and for me, because I'd been through it before. And we could just kind of shampoo, rinse, repeat on some of those steps.
Right. And the first time, neither one of you had been through it before at all. So yeah, just having that experience. I always say experience is that thing you get right after you needed it. So
we need to quote you on that.
Yeah, maybe. But it's like, yeah, so the confidence in that. So yeah, people can find about NACWE at NACWE.org and get a hold of me there. When Karen was talking earlier, right, about all these other things I was doing, that was part of my like really God hesitation moment, right? Was I had just branded Becoming Irresistible and all the digital marketing stuff. And it was moving along, right? Like and then I felt like, okay, we're starting all over, but really God has found a really beautiful way of bringing these two things together in my life. And Karen and I talk all the time, right? We talk about we're more, she's a more is more girl. I'm a more is more girl. So it's no surprise that I'm like, yeah, we could do this and this and 20 other things, but he can focus me in and just, yeah. So I love marketing. I love words. That's interesting. So this is what just dawned on me as you're like watching me. I am a math girl in my background, right? So I've always said I'm a math girl. And then I started doing some copywriting. I'm like, yeah, copywriting is writing for math people because it's pretty formulaic. It follows a pattern, right? And then we did this book. So it was like this transition God brought me through, right? Into, sure, let's just write. Okay. I needed copywriting in the middle, apparently.
Another example of how he doesn't see boundaries the same way that we do, or transitions the same way that we do. If we could, when we sit with him, it's very evident. No, this fits. You can do that. You can be this and this. That you can be varied. You can be multi-talented. I can use all of the gifts that I've given you. I forget that.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget that in business for sure, because we try to stay so focused, and it's necessary, but that doesn't mean other stuff doesn't get to come back.
Well, and so I think people need to know that I have benefited from NACWE under your leadership, but also from Becoming Irresistible elements through your leadership as well. And so finding you at NACWE.org or NACWE.com, or we'll put the Facebook link in there as well for them. If they had a need that really fell under digital marketing, you would direct them along the right path. I think even today, this very day, we've had communications on both. So,
yeah, for sure.
So I think that's great. Yeah. I love the color and flair. Talk about the conference, because there's still time for some people who might be watching this video to jump in.
Yeah, and if you miss this one, come to the next one, right? Like there's always another. But this conference is called Create. And the theme is basically created to create. We were all formed in the image of our creator. And it kind of comes from this place where I'm talking about, like, I never really thought being a math person, like, people are like, oh, that's not creative. But the reality is, right, God's creative. And so every single one of us is creative, even if it looks different for each of us. And then I've, leaned way into my much more creative side in the last few years.
Oh, absolutely.
entrepreneurship stuff. And so it's just that. And so we have amazing, it's workshop style. I like to say we're going to leave more with more stuff done than to do, because
I love that.
and listen to more people talk. I just have more and more to do, and I want to leave with stuff done as I'm focusing on my business. So yeah, you can go to NACWEconference.com and sign up for that, and get a plane ticket and fly in, and we'd love to have you.
April
19th through the evening of the 21st, and then the 22nd morning, if you're around, you know, we may do a brunch or something, but you know, that one's sort of optional. So, but through the evening of the 21st, and registration starts at 4:00 on the 19th.
I love the create during workshop style conference idea but I will say that's kind of intimidating, right? Because sometimes you're thinking, what? I have to sit down and I'm going to leave with something. There's this pressure to perform, you know, to develop, to create something, and you wonder, am I going to have writer's block or whatever? But as a writer and a writing coach, a publisher and that sort of thing, I think the testimony is we know this, right? We sit down, we pick up a pen, a marker, you know, washi tape, whatever we available, and think, I have no idea, you know, what I'm getting ready to do. But that surrender, that trust and that obedience leads to every time. Have you ever sat down under someone's direction to create and not been just blown away, surprised by what the Lord led you to do? And so the blessing will far outweigh any fear factor that we might bring to the table with us. And so there's this great anticipation for me, like, and there's a part of me that thinks, well, wait a minute, you know, I'm in a totally different season of my life. You know, what do I even need to create? What am I going to get out of this conference? And then there's that, you know, just still small voice saying, no, you're the one who always says that when you sit down in obedience and you be quiet for 2 seconds longer than you normally are and you listen to the Lord, what is amazing. So I know everyone will leave with a testimony and a direction, you know, clarity and focus, and probably something they never would have thought they would have designed, because like you said, it's not them, it's God's design in them.
Yeah.
I love that reminder. God is the creator. He created us. Therefore, we are created as creative beings. I don't think of myself as that way, but I want to.
Yeah.
So I needed to hear that again.
Yeah. I know. I know. Yeah, I know. I don't think I've never really thought, you know, of myself as creative either, even though I know, logically, right? You can say, yeah, of course, I'm created in the image of my creator, so I have to be creative. But to know it here and know that it's not even like what you were saying, like it's not even my creation, it's his, like flowing through. Yeah.
Takes some pressure off. There's some freedom in that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm looking forward to then with the conference, is the freedom of letting it flow and letting it happen. And I will be celebrating my birthday that week, so that's my treat to me, is to take myself from Texas to Arizona for the week. So.
Yay.
Anything else before we go? Thank you guys for listening to us chitter chat.
I mean, I don't think so. I think just to say, step out. When a few years ago at the NACWE conference, when Shay Bynes spoke, and I've never forgotten this, right? She said, the GPS can't redirect a parked car. Right. And I've used that many times since then in this, like God will order our steps, but we have to start stepping.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've used that too as in the counseling venue. I've used that multiple times. Let's move. Let's take some steps. And that will lead to other steps as well.
Yeah. That clarity.
Well, gosh, thank you for your impact and influence in my life. And for your impact and influence in the chapter of this book. I look forward to, I know that the Lord isn't finished with us yet. He's got lots more things in store. I'm looking forward to it for sure. Thank you for all the years of prayer too, because I think you were probably praying for me and for NACWE and the transition that might happen before you knew it was you for, I'm going to say it was almost a year.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'd reached out and I appreciate
right.
it. Just a handful of people that I trusted with the information.
Yeah.
It was such a blessing. So,
Yeah.
sister,
Oh, for sure.
God bless you, Heather.
Thank you. You too.
Oh, it won't let me close. It's me and all my tabs open. All right. Thanks.
All good.